Okay. So I'm not going to talk about too much about us. You know, we're a global company, customers all around the world. We focus on companies like Mills Products, that's small to mid-sized companies. We have much larger customers. I mean, M-Files is a very scalable product. So I'm not going to go through a whole lot of this background piece and Gartner and Forrester. I mean, there's information in here about Gartner and Forrester. But this slide I'm going to spend just a couple minutes on because this kind of lays the foundation for how M-Files works as a product. So what M-Files does, and today, are you guys currently storing documents out on a shared drive type system?
Well, for the use we probably will start off with, which is accounts payable, we still have the hard copies we file in a filing cabinet.
Okay, that's all right. That's the other piece of this, because the two things that people do, and because this is without a document management system, that's all they have, is they store electronic documents out in, you know, a shared network folder structure, and then they store.
And we do that sometimes too. Don't get me wrong, but for the most part, if it's an electronic document that's an invoice, somebody's going to print it off.
Okay. And then that's in a file cabinet, and so it's kind of the same thing, because in both of these situations, you're managing your data or your content by where it lives. So in a folder structure, you know, you got to navigate yourself from your drive to your folder to your subfolder till you eventually get to the file that you want. Same thing with a file cabinet. You know, you got to obviously walk to the right one, pull the right drawer, leaf through the file folders till you find the actual document you're looking for. So at M-Files, we do things differently. We manage information by what it is, not by where it's stored. So everything within M-Files will be classified with something called metadata. Have you ever heard of that term?
I have.
Okay, so that's perfect. So metadata are things that will describe the actual type of document. In your case, we're mostly talking about invoices. So the document type, you know, is going to be, maybe you'll have a vendor invoice, and then maybe you'll have a sales invoice, you know, two different types of invoices. And then, so for a vendor invoice, relevant information might be who's the vendor, the invoice number, the dollar amount. You know, these types of things are what can be construed as metadata or properties. For a sales invoice, then you might have the customer. You might have a project associated with that sale, or you might have, you know, the date, maybe the salesperson, or whoever, whatever you want, because this will be built for you, specifically for you, with the content that you want on your documents. And so once the metadata has been captured and stored, now you can use that metadata to group your documents in meaningful ways to you. And we call these groupings dynamic views. So it's kind of like a saved search. You know, have you ever gone out and, like on monster.com, and search for a job? Then you've created a saved search. You know, you put in some properties. Your properties being, well, I want a job of this type, and I want it to be in this geographical location. Maybe I want it to be within this salary range, and send me an email, you know, once a week on any jobs. And what that does is it filters out everything out there on monster.com of all the jobs, and whatever it finds that meets your criteria, it'll send it to you. And the same thing happens in M-Files with these views. You'll create a filter to look through all of the documents in the vault and bring things back the way that you want them displayed. Maybe it's a customer view, or maybe it's a date and time view. So you want to see all the invoices for the month of June. Or maybe you want to see things by project or by vendor, or whatever you want to have that you want to group these things together. So that's going to be something that we'll focus on in the demo. So, so within M-Files, we don't have any folders. You don't ever have to worry about where something is stored ever again. You just have to remember anything about it, the type of document it is. Even if you can't remember anything about it, you can just type in invoice, and it'll bring back all the invoices for you. So as long as you can...
So it can search on any of those criteria.
It can search on...
Whatever you set up as your criteria.
Exactly. But not only that, but any word or number that's in the contents of that invoice will be searchable as well. And I'll show you that. So because everything that we save is always going to be fully text searchable, because we have this OCR module that will convert all of your paper documents when they're scanned in into a fully text searchable PDF document. So these are the strengths that this Gartner found about us, but I use this slide really to talk about the foundation of M-Files. So it's a very easy user interface. You'll see it here in a minute. We have very strong ways to regulate who can see what. So I don't know if this is going to come into play for you guys, but you can control who has access to what types of documents based on their login, and also based on all of this metadata. So this can control who can see, various types of things in the vault, because maybe you're going to start with AP, but maybe the next department that goes live on M-Files might be HR. So now,
right, that's what I was thinking.
So now HR has a lot more rules about the documents that are going to be stored in the vault, about who can see them. So that's the beauty of all of these ability to manage by permissions. We also have workflow built into M-Files, which ties into your email, and you'll see where it shows your workflow assignments in the M-Files user interface. And the word I use for that's called the client. Is that a term you're familiar with when I say client?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a vendor invoice that comes in, and you guys have to pay it, within some period of time. Then that typically today, I'm assuming that paper document gets routed from office to office to get eventually a check written.
Correct.
So then you can build that office to office process right into M-Files and route that invoice electronically from person to person with a deadline for them to do whatever it is you want them to do, which would be their assignment. And so I'm going to run through an exact workflow like that for a vendor invoice.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good.
And I'm going to show you how we do those kind of things. So anything that you want to save into the vault, then you can just save it into M-Files lots of different ways. You can drag and drop things. You can do, if you can file save as from any application, you can tell it you want it to save into M-Files by just picking the M drive. So the vault looks just like a drive to your computer. It's virtual, but it looks just like a drive. So you can drag and drop things into the M drive. You can file save as into the M drive. So anything that you can do, you'll be able to do on electronic documents. And then you'll see that there's some integration that automatically takes place with your Microsoft Office products like Word and Excel and Outlook and PowerPoint. And that gives you the ability to do things like compare versions and see what's different between two Word documents, for example, or two Excel spreadsheets. And I don't know if you guys create any documents from templates or those kind of things. So you can do all of that within M-Files, and you can compare versions, and because we're always going to track all of that.
Okay.
Now, when Jason talked to you about M-Files, did he talk about on-premise or cloud? Have you got any awareness of that?
I can't remember that he specifically talked about that.
Okay.
I mean, I think he did mention on-premise because he was talking about server capacity and things like that.
Right. Okay. So we can support either platform. So if you guys have a server there and you want to install your M-Files there and have all of your documents and data stored there on your server, then we call that on-premise. And then the other option that you would have would be to go with what we call a cloud vault. So then your data and your documents would all be stored in the cloud in Microsoft's Azure AZUR. You can see their data center network. And then from a user perspective, you can't tell the difference. I mean, you can't tell whether you're connecting to a vault on your server there or a vault in the cloud. So it's
go ahead. I'm just asking, is it cheaper in the cloud?
Well, it's different. It's a different classification of expense from your accounting standpoint. And so it's a monthly per user subscription. So
I got you.
Over a period of time, it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah,
so, So in an on-premise install, you buy the software once and you own it. And then every year after the first year, you can choose to extend your subscription or renew your subscription where you get free upgrades and free support.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a 25% of your software cost that you paid for it. Now with the Cloud Vault, you never have to pay that annual subscription because you're always current, you're always on the new release. It's just a monthly subscription fee. So it sometimes, depending on how much software you have and how much that renewal fee is, you know, the base prices come to about the same after a year. But then the renewal adds in if you're on premise, and so then, you know, it takes some more time on the Cloud Vault to equal that. So it's just a different, some people don't want to have the expenditure of an IT network in-house. They don't want to have a server. They don't want to have somebody
Right.
that maintains it. So you have to figure that cost in as well. So
Can I ask you a question?
you sure can.
When you say the like if you have it on premise and you have the subscription, is that your licensing fee for the year, or is that on top of that?
No. So let's talk about it again. Let's separate out on-premise and cloud. So on-premise, there is no subscription. You pay for the software once, period. So let's just use some round numbers. So let's say that you bought 10 users, and let's just say you paid $5,000 for that. And then you bought the OCR module and some consulting services, and so whatever that amounts to get your vault up and running, that's what you paid. Now you own it. It's yours. You never have to buy software licenses again. It never expires.
Oh, okay.
Your license never expires. Then for 12
Okay,
months,
gotcha.
you have free upgrades. So whatever new software we release over the next 12 months, you can get for free.
Okay.
At the end of the 12-month period, you'll be offered an opportunity to renew your subscription. And when I say subscription, I mean renew your maintenance and support. And so you could, and that's at 25% of those licenses that you bought. So if we said that your software was, yeah, so let's say, and these have no bearing on anything, I'll just say it was, I'm going to say 20,000 because that's easy to go 25% of. Yours won't probably be that expensive. But so let's just say you have $20,000 in licenses. So at the end of 12 months, your renewal would be $5,000 or 25% of that 20,000. And but it's optional. You don't have to do it. That gets you, continuing free upgrades and access to tech support. So that's on premise. Now with the cloud, you're going to pay per month per user. So let's just say for those same 10 users, you're going to pay $400 a month, just to pick a number, because it's easy.
Yeah.
So $400 a month forever, or until there's a price change. But you never have to pay, renewal fees. You never have to pay anything to get new software. You're always going to be on the latest release. So eventually that.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, that's good to know.
Yeah, eventually.
I can see some companies are less inclined if this would be a capital expenditure.
Right.
I've played that game before.
Exactly. So you know how it works.
Where they do whatever doesn't have to require a lot of permission to get to do. So I get it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's an expense, every month, but over, some period of time, you will end up paying more money for those licenses than if you bought them up front. But really, that's not the biggest contributing factor to people buying cloud vaults is the fact that they don't want to have the IT infrastructure in-house to manage it.
And that's true. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's a nice option to know,
right?
Especially for a smaller company. Sometimes if you're trying to make a wholesale sale on something that people aren't that sure of, I've dealt with document management systems before in other companies that I've worked for, so I know they can work, and I know they can work well. But this is a much smaller company than I've worked for previously, and so a lot of times some of the people that have worked here maybe have not ever worked anywhere that had something like this. So when you start trying to make the sales pitch, it's nice to have options.
Sure. And the beautiful thing about the Cloud Vault also is you're not locked in forever, by making that big purchase up front. So, you're really only locked in for 12 months. And then
Okay.
after the 12 months, you could stop paying if you wanted, and we give you all the data and you can do whatever you want. Now, I'll be honest, I've been here 2 years yesterday, and I've never heard of or seen a customer yet that has stopped using M-Files once they've got it. I mean, it really is.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I mean, because I mean, just, where I worked, where we actually had on base there, and it was certainly much different because I worked there about 5 or 6 years ago. And, once you get used to being able to locate everything and actually have it at your fingertips, especially, we used it for AP because we had an outsourcer doing our AP, so we never physically had the invoices on site. So it was really nice in accounting. If you wanted to look at an invoice, you could go there. And in Mills's instance here, we have a plant in another location, and they actually send all of their invoices after they've entered them into our general ledger package or AP package. They send them here to Nashville, and so if they ever want to see something, they really can't. We either have to scan it for them and send it, and so I think once people see how nice that is, there'll be no turning back. I feel confident.
Yeah. Once
they just don't always know.
Yeah. Once they see how easy it is, so from wherever that other location is, clearly somebody there would have an M-Files login and access to the vault and be able to search and see whatever they want, and they will love it.
Sure.
Yeah, they'll love it.
Yeah, that definitely. I mean, and to be honest, we have a small corporate office, and we entertain the idea of being a virtual office at some point. Maybe just coming into an office maybe once or twice a week. And so for us, that would be wonderful to be able to just pull up the invoices. Just another thing to negate having to come to the office. So I think for us, we know that this could be good and would be fitting in the way we want to do things.
Sure. So I'm in Raleigh. I don't know if I told you that. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And,
okay.
And so I'm responsible for the Southeast for M-Files, and so LBMC and Jason and his team are one of my premier solution provider partners. So M-Files corporate office is in Dallas, and then we also have a corporate office in Finland. So
Finland own you?
Finland is the parent company.
Yeah.
And then the U.S. is an incorporated company in Dallas, and we've been here in the U.S. for 7 or 8 years. We're arguably the fastest growing document management company in the world. But I am actively accessing multiple M-Files vaults in Dallas and Finland and in the cloud all day long from my office here in Raleigh. So I'm the poster child for virtual office remote access. So, and all of our salespeople are the same way.
Yeah, I think for us, that's exactly, I think for a company like Mills, they're small enough that they have not had maybe the need for that. But one of the things that, we try to impress upon them, and me, when I say we, the CFO, I'm the controller, and the CFO, we both came from the same company. And so much larger company, so we're aware of, maybe some of the technology that's out there and how it really, really facilitates doing business. And the customers that we have are customers of major corporations. So sometimes, they're forcing you to, I guess, innovate. Maybe when you don't always think that's as big a deal for your company. So I think for us, we definitely want to see this happen. So it's just finding the platform that works for our size company, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, nope, that sounds great. So let's skip over a lot of this stuff now. I will mention one thing on this slide. So you asked about M-Files, kind of asking who we are and, kind of what there is about us. But if you go out on the internet and you Google top 10 reviews, and then once
I've done it already.
Well, you mentioned OnBase. So here you can see OnBase, and then as these people compared these 10 products, and we didn't pay them, and you can see that they ranked M-Files #1 with a perfect score of 10. And
I told Jason that I had seen that because, like I said, I originally attended an OnBase demo because I had used OnBase before.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came back, I said to everybody that asked me, I said, it looks great, but I think it's a bigger engine than we need, and it'll probably price us out of the market.
Right.
And I said, so, and so I looked to see who was OnBase's competitors, and I saw you guys. So when Jason mentioned you, I was, happy that I had seen good reports.
Sure. And OnBase is a good product. Don't get me wrong. It's a great product, but exactly the reasons that you have are the same reasons that Jeff McCorpin and Stacy and the people at LBMC opted to bring in M-Files as a companion product to OnBase for this type of reason, because M-Files can appeal to a different customer base. It's a different price point, and mainly it's a different price point. But I think that when you get in and see all that we can do, you're probably going to be surprised at how powerful M-Files really is. So anyway, you've already seen this, so we don't need to harp on it anymore. I'm not going to talk about this, not going to talk about this. Here's what the drive looks like. In just a few seconds, we're going to show the real thing. And then this is what we call the properties card. So this is what you're going to use when you manually are classifying a document. So let's just say you created some document from Word, or you created a spreadsheet or whatever, and then you dragged it and dropped it into the M-Files in one of the many different ways you can do that. Then this properties card will pop up where you can then classify that as what it is. And so this structure that you'll see when we get into the demo is going to be a structure built for you, specifically for Mills products. So
is that kind of like, for lack of a better word, your header record?
Well, it's the metadata record, and in some cases where you have a header for a file that could contain some information about the document, but you're going to see it in a totally different light when we get into this, because one of the beautiful things about M-Files is you don't have to have a document to have data. So, for example, you can build your customer records, vendor records, and all of these things within M-Files, and you'll see when I get into the software how that information exists, and there's no document. That's just information that you're using to classify your documents with. So you'll have a card, you'll have a customer record that describes everything about the customer, and there's never a document unless you wanted to print out that metadata card. So
I got you.
I'll show you all kinds of information about that, but the things about M-Files are we only store the documents once, period. And then from that moment on, we're only storing changes. So whether you change the metadata or you change the contents, or if it's an invoice, for example, going through a workflow, every change in the workflow state, so every time it moves from person to person, we'll create a new version, because we're always going to track who did what and when on every document that's in the vault.
Okay.
And then I talked about.
Can anybody see that, or is that?
It's up to you.
Is that something that only an admin person can see, or how does that work?
It's up to you to determine who you want to be able to see, the metadata properties for these documents. But it will be normally it's going to be available, and anybody can see where a document is in the process. see who last
Okay.
modified it. But again, that can be all controlled by people's login. And so you can control who can see what.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, perfect. All right. Now we also, the last thing I'll talk about is the fact that we have 3 ways to look at information. The Windows client, which I'm going to spend a lot of time with you on now. We also have the web client, so you could, probably doesn't apply so much to you guys, but let's say you are normally accessing M-Files through a direct connection to your network, and you're remote, you're working from home, like you talked about. Well, what would happen if your network went down? So maybe now you can't use your Windows client, but your server is still running, and you can still access the internet from your home, so you can use M-Files web client to actually get into your vault.
Oh,
then
okay.
And then we also have the ability for you to get access to your vault through smartphones and tablets. So there's apps actually out on the app stores for the iPhone, the Android, the Windows phones. And of course you can use those apps on the tablets. If it's running full Windows, you can actually run it through the web client or the Windows client from your tablet. So I have a tablet. I have an Asus tablet that runs full Windows 8.1 or 8.2, and I actually have the full M-Files Windows client running on that tablet.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend much time here. We think that we have a product that's the best of both worlds. All the features you find at the high end with all of these benefits of low-end products, easy to use, very cheap, but these don't do much. But we do all the things that these companies up here do that are very expensive with a long implementation cycle. And so we think that, and then we're priced for the small to mid-sized company, so we think that uniquely differentiates us from everybody else. So, okay, let's open up the demo software. So now, can you see my Magic of M-Files screen?
I can.
Okay, so here's our computer icon. So now you can see there's the M-Files vault sitting out there. These numbers don't mean anything, so don't pay any attention to them. It's just Windows needs something, but this is a virtual drive. So I could drag files on top of it. I could file save as from any application into the M drive, because you'll see it, on your directory here of anything on your computer. You're going to see that M drive, so you can save things to it, and you can also actually double click on it and open up your Windows client. So I have lots of different vaults, so when I double click on it, I have to choose which vault I'm going to go in, because I do lots of demos. So you can see I have things like a real estate vault where we did something specifically for a realtor office. I've got some other different types of vaults that I do demos for, but we're going to work in this DMS vault here today. So I've already got it opened up here on the desktop, and you probably noticed here you'll have an icon on your desktop, for M-Files. All your users will, just like any other application. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing, you double click on it and it'll open up, and you would go right into the vault, whereas I have to select which one, but you'll go right into here. Okay. So now let me tell you what you're looking at here, give you a quick tour. So here's one of the cool things is when you log into M-Files. Now, do you guys use Active Directory? Does that make any, you recognize that term?
I don't know. No, I don't know what you mean.
When you come into your office in the morning and you sign, do you have a laptop or a workstation?
Laptop.
So when you sign on, when you open up your laptop, you have to log in, right?
I do.
Now, do you have other applications that you use there at Mills? What happens? What happens when you log in? It just goes right to your home screen, right? Like this?
It does. Yep. Okay. The desktop.
So now, when you have another application, so you want to open up your accounting software, is that a icon here on your desktop?
It probably is. I usually go into the Start menu for whatever reason.
Okay.
So have it, but
you go Start and find it here on your.
Yeah.
Do you have to log in again?
Yes, usually.
Okay, so you're not using Active Directory, or you're not using anything that's called like single sign-on. So
No.
when I come in the morning, the very first thing I have to do is log into my computer just like you. But we use Active Directory, and so that logs me into everything. So now when I open up M-Files, notice, like I did here, it doesn't ask me to log in. Whereas when you double click your icon, okay, this is what you're going to see. So now I've logged out. And so now when I go into my vault, again, it knows that you'll have to log in. Okay?
I will have a sign-on screen to come in. So yeah, I got
right.
it.
You'll have a login screen because your login is going to be controlling what you have access to, as will everybody. We'll have, based on their username and password and who they are, we're going to build in the permissions that you guys tell us to build in for everybody in your team. But the beautiful thing about M-Files is when you log in to M-Files, you can immediately get a picture of current activities. So notice here I'm seeing a document that I still have checked out. So now maybe I forgot to check it back in, or maybe I'm still working on it. So I'm creating some kind of document. I don't want anybody else to be able to open it up to edit it until I'm ready. So I've left it checked out. So I see that. Now also you'll see here another little triangle icon that I can pop up here and open it up. But now I can scroll up and down and see things that I have looked at recently. So you can see all the dates here. So now maybe you're coming into M-Files looking for an invoice that you worked on yesterday. Well, it'll be right here on your list. So you don't have to search for it. You don't have to go to one of these views, save searches to find it. It might just be right here on your list of things that you've looked at recently. Okay? The other thing that you will see when you log in is if you have a workflow assignment. So it would be another blue bar here that says assign to me. So now when we run this AP vendor invoice workflow here in a couple minutes, and when we come back into this client, you're going to see where it says assign to me right here as another blue bar. So you'll get a quick look at things that are currently active for you. Now the rest of this center portion of the screen are all those views I talked about. So you'll have at the bottom, you can see these are kind of like system views where you've got things like favorites, shortcuts to the same places I just showed you, like assigned to me and checked out to me, and offline. So I didn't mention offline yet, but remember I talked about your network going down?
Right.
What if your network goes down and you can't access your server, but you desperately have to work on a document, or you have to make a presentation to a customer, or you need something that's in the M-Files vault. So if you have marked that document for offline use, you now will be able to just open up M-Files, and M-Files will know it does not have a network connection, and it will tell you you don't have a network connection and ask you if you want to work offline. And when you say yes, then it goes back and checks all the documents that are indicated here, and it's going to bring all of these documents in to be available to you. And so
where is it storing that? I mean, does that take up space?
It's in your cache memory. Okay. So you can see that when I check that offline view, it's not showing me a whole lot. Okay. Well, here's a bunch of documents. So there's 4 or 5 documents. Now if I go back one screen, like here, now you can see this is what I do. I mark things to be a part of my favorites. Look at all those documents. So now when I go offline, all of those documents are going to be available for me to work on, simply because I've marked them as a favorite, and then I keep this whole favorites view available offline simply by right-clicking on it. So here I am on favorites. I'm going to right-click, and you can see here mark for offline availability, which I've already done, as you just saw. So you can take any single document or any group of documents and have them available to you if you don't have access to your server. Nobody else can do that. Then So those are system views. And then you've got common views. Common means everybody sees these that has access rights to them. So they're more generic, like customer views and project views, employee views. So you might have a vendor view, for example, showing all your vendors and their anything related to them. Whatever you want to have as common views. And then here, every single person who has a login, every user, will be able to create their own personal views. So things that are relevant for them in their job. So you can see I've created some views for various demos like invoices due to pay, invoices to export, unpaid invoices, because, you know, as it goes through a workflow, if it doesn't show marked as paid, we're searching that filter and then it'll show up here. So documents by month and year, contracts expiring in 6 months. So these are more specific. So I've created a filter over here under new, just created a new view right here and filtered out what I want to make in this view. It's really very simple. So I'll show you that again in a few minutes when we look at some of these views after we create a document. And then at the top, it's the all-important search bar. That's where you're going to type in whatever it is you're looking for, and it will search wherever you tell it to search. So it defaults that it's going to look everywhere in both the metadata and the file contents, but if you want to limit that, you can limit that if you want to. And so why would you do that? Well, 5 years from now, Mills Products is a $500 million company, and you've got 3 million documents in your vault. Well, now you want to make your search fast because you're searching through lots of things. So now maybe you want to limit what you're searching through. Okay, so it's all about making it fast and easy. And then you could do some advanced searching and create some very specific filters, like, you know, maybe your CFO comes to you and says, Julie, I need to see all of the vendor invoices for vendor XYZ from June of 2010 that were over $5,000.
Okay.
Now, in today's world, how would you go get that? You'd be leafing.
You just have to pull the whole vendor file.
And you'd be leafing through that whole vendor file, looking for invoices for June of 2010, and then you'd have to look at which ones are over $5,000. It's going to take you a couple hours, right? You can create that save search right here or create that filter in 30 seconds and pull back all of those documents that are in the vault.
That looks good to me.
So then on the left side of the screen is what we call the task pane, okay? So anytime you want to create some new content, you can create it here. And anytime you highlight a document, so we highlighted a document over here, you know, one of these documents, and you can then see some additional things will pop up when you highlight a document. And then at the bottom, you know, you've always got some shortcuts, go to screen. So go in here takes you back to the home screen always. And then you can look at those same places like checked out to me and assigned to me and favorites right from here. So again, highlighting a document will do two things. It'll pop up some additional things that you can do here, and it will also, you might have noticed over here on the right side, it now pops up all the information about that document. So here's that metadata card, that properties card that I showed you early on. So here's all the information about that document. You can see how many versions there are, when it was created by who, when it was last modified by who, and you can also see that it's still checked out to me. And then here is all the information. You can see it's a proposal. Here's the date, here's the customer, there's a proposal number that's automatically generated. You can see it's got a contact name on it and other information. And at the bottom, you can see who has access to it. And over here, if there was workflow, you'd see that it has workflow. So if I click on one of these invoices down here somewhere, like this one here, now it's going to pop up some workflow related stuff over here. And now you can see that this workflow has already been approved. And it's an approved state, and that means it's waiting for what? Somebody named John to write a check and add this to their accounting system. That's his assignment. So it's still showing assigned to John. And we're going to run this workflow here in just a couple minutes. But then you can see I'm seeing all of the steps here in the workflow because I'm an admin user. But if I'm John and I come into my log into M-Files, then I'm going to see one assigned to me here, and the only state I will have authority to move it into would be into this page state. So that's all he would see. So
Okay.
the right side of this screen also will show you what that document is. And so you can click the preview tab, and you can very quickly see the actual, specific copy of the invoice in this case, and any other type of document that's in the vault. Doesn't matter what it is. So you can see the preview of the document, and you can see the metadata of that document. And this preview pane over here on the right, you can show anything that you want to store. Now I know most of yours, and certainly in the beginning, are all going to be PDFs because you're going to scan, all those paper documents in.
Right.
But you could eventually start storing anything you want. You can store pictures in here. I don't know what, in your business, if you guys need to have pictures related to projects or things, but you can preview any type of document, that you put in the vault. So are there...
Well, I could see we do some tooling or some, we have some specs that customers send us. I could see, there's just
Sure.
limitless ways you could use this,
Yeah.
so that everybody could see it. If somebody,
Absolutely.
if an engineer, we have a location in Mexico, if an engineer in Mexico needed to see maybe a design that was done here in the U.S., now we either have to scan it and send it to him because they don't.
So
they're
you
not
have the
allowed to
paper
get on
documents.
Yeah, so I mean, there's just limitless ways you could utilize this.
Oh yeah. So if those documents are electronic and you're printing them out and then scanning them in and then sending to him because they're not in a format that he can read, well, you could just store the electronic document in the vault. And then if
Right.
that plant in Mexico has M-Files access, then they could just search for it and find it. And so it doesn't, so maybe, I don't know, you guys use CAD files?
We do some.
So you could store your CAD files here within M-Files as well, and the preview of it will be in a CAD format. If you have, the viewing software for AutoCAD, in this case is called TrueView by Autodesk, it actually opens up in a CAD format where the user can actually manipulate the file. So maybe, they want to see some information about this door, they can use some of these tools right here within M-Files to be able to manipulate this door.
Oh, wow.
And so, you can do all. Now, I'm not a CAD person, so I pretty much have no idea what I'm doing right now. I just know it's cool. So there's all kinds of things that you can do. So, and of course, all your PDFs. So if I type PDF, now notice it's highlighting everything I search for in yellow. And, so there's all kinds of PDFs here in the vault. So if you click on one, the same stuff happens. You get the metadata. You get the preview of it. And in this case, it even shows that a note was put onto this PDF under Adobe, and then it was saved back into the vault. So we're actually bringing the note back in. Now, I'll tell you, this may not be of interest to you, but this month we're coming out with a new version of our software where I would have another button over here right now. It's called Annotations button. And I would be able to add an annotation on here, and now a menu will pop up over here where I could put a box, a square, a line, redlining, a cloud. I could draw some text, write some text in the cloud. I could put annotations right onto this document, like if it's going through a...
So kind of like a PDF, like you can do in PDF.
Kind of, if you have Adobe Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can put annotations, but the beautiful thing about annotations, see, when you get a document from a PDF that somebody has put stuff on like that, you have no idea who did it or when. Every one of these annotations is going to have its own metadata. So you'll be able to see who put that annotation on and when, You could hide them. You could view them all together. You can view them individually. It's really, really cool. And that's coming out this month.
Let me just ask you this for an example. So, like, when we get a supplier invoice, many times people will write on the invoice the account number it's going to.
Uh-huh.
Is that something that you'd be better doing, like, as you were mentioning, the word just left me.
Metadata?
No, the A
annotations.
Annotated. For some reason I went blank. Would you be better to do that in the annotation, or literally still writing it on the document and you can see it on the document? Would it still be searchable then? Would the OCR be able to pick it up?
Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. So an invoice comes in from the supplier. How are they sending it to you?
It can be mail, it can be email.
Okay. So let's talk about both situations. So if it's in the mail, you're going to have a hard copy. So you're going to scan it in, right?
Hmm?
So now you see this metadata for this invoice. So for you guys, one of the important pieces of information would be account number.
Okay.
So on your metadata properties card, we would have a property for account number. Now you can see it's not on this list currently. Okay, we don't have an account number property. So we would add for your metadata card, I would add an account number in here. So then once this has been scanned and it's now in M-Files, probably the first step in your workflow that's going to go to somebody is going to be add the due date, add the account number, and maybe so you maybe don't have a GL code, maybe that's your account number.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the GL code.
Yeah.
I call it account number, but it's the GL code.
That's a part of the workflow. And that's actually what we're going to do here in just a second. Now, if the document's coming in electronic, well, it works the same way. You just don't have to do the scan piece. If they send it to you via email, then you're just going to drag and drop that email and the attachment right into the vault. And you never have to print it. And I'm going to show you that too in just a second. So
right.
Yeah, that now becomes a piece of metadata, that GL code. Now, that is a much more...
We used to call that the header record, kind of.
Yeah, that's fine. I can see that. That makes sense. Now you've got all of this information here in this metadata card, and so you can do things like I can pop this metadata card out. So maybe I'm working on two screens, so I could drag this over to my other screen. And so notice I can still see it here, but maybe I want to see the preview as well, so I could move this over here and click there. Now I see them both at the same time.
So let me ask this question. Sorry.
That's okay.
When something gets scanned, for example, because I think we probably get a fair amount of things still via the mail.
Uh-huh.
So if something gets scanned, and it's a machine-generated invoice, how much of that metadata is that properties record? It's automatically populated, or
can be 100%.
Okay.
Because it just depends on the invoice itself. So what you're talking about is what we call a zonal scan. Okay, so when it gets converted from the paper document from the scanner, and it's going to be scanned into a folder, and we're going to watch that folder, and we're going to pick up the document, and we're going to do a zonal scan on it, but we have to know the layout. So how many different suppliers do you guys have? Ballpark.
Probably at least 300 or 400.
Yeah. So it's a lot. So there's no way to know the layout of all of those invoices. But if you had to do a bar chart on your volume of vendors, how many of them would you say are the biggest volume? You have a top 10 list, top 15
We
list?
would, yes.
Yeah. So take those top 10 or 15 vendors. Give us a copy of the invoice. We will scan it, convert it to a TIFF file, and we will lay out a process to capture all of that information, all the information you want off of where it's located on these pages. And then
Okay.
every time you scan it into that particular vendor's folder, it knows that we're going to go here and pick up the invoice number, we're going to go here and pick the company name, we're going to go here and pick the invoice amount, whatever you want off of the invoice. We're going to predefine these locations. I'll show you how we do that. And then we'll pick all of that up, and it will be metadata on here automatically.
Okay, gotcha.
So then your first person that gets the assignment only has to add the account number and maybe the due date. If the vendor has, some vendors have 30-day terms, some have 45, some have 15. But it's even possible that we could automatically enter that once we see the vendor name.
So let me ask you this. The worst case scenario, the most manual scenario would be that you would fill out this property's metadata, these things manually after you scan it in, right?
And it'll take 10 seconds.
Okay.
Because
no,
all of these will
that's
be...
what I'm trying to... I want to
right.
just make sure that I understand exactly that certainly for maybe our top 10 or 15 suppliers, we can do this, I guess, I'm not sure I know exactly the right way to put it, but you're going to almost have the odd, so that you can do the zonal scanning, you'll have that
right.
defined.
Right.
And then, but when I lay this out for somebody, I want them to know, okay, and they'll get that because, like I said, we came from an era where almost what we would call this properties page was header record data, and somebody always had to enter all of that because the
right.
OCR, the optical character readers weren't very good back then. So, yeah, so I get it. It's good.
Yeah,
like
and all of this stuff will be drop-down menus, most of it. So it'll be a very fast process that we go through.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
And so that's a quick look at, although we spent some time talking about different things, of the client piece. And here's the back-end piece, Julie, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but here's the server administrator piece where we're going to create your vault for you, and we're going to create the structure based on your needs. So this is just kind of an example, right, of a standard typical business. So these are what we call objects, and the objects mean that they have data that describes them. So a customer is an object, a project is an object, a vendor is an object. Anything can be an object in your vault. Maybe, and your term for vendor will be supplier. It won't be vendor. So it'll be for you. This will be created for you during the implementation. And then you'll be able to group your document types together. Of course, in the beginning, you won't have too many different document types, but most of yours will be accounting related. So,
right.
you might have just one or two groupings here, but they're all going to be accounting related documents, like purchase invoice, sales invoice, maybe you've got bill of sales, or maybe you have other types of agreements or receipts, and then you might have checks, if you're scanning checks that you're sending out back in to the vault. Whatever you do, any types of document, we create the structure for your vault during the implementation, and then the metadata card that I showed you is predefined here. So like for that purchase invoice, here's all of the properties. Now, this is a lot of stuff. You may not have all of this stuff on your purchase invoice as metadata. And of course, only a few of these are required. So they don't force the user to enter it unless they have a workflow assignment. But you can change the value of that simply by, again, right-clicking on it. So if I right-click on vendor, you can see that it currently says it's optional. So I could change that to a required property by simply clicking here. And now it will indicate in the client that that's required, and it won't let somebody close out that property card properties card without entering that information. So we'll create your structure here. So that's an invoice.
Okay.
Here's a proposal, for example, and then that's all the associated metadata. So again, this information, these objects will be specifically related for you. So I have other types of vaults. So here's a doctor's vault. So you can see their objects are totally different. Patient, appointment, caregiver, child. So it's a fully configurable system that will be defined specifically for mills. Now, don't get concerned that you don't know what to do, because we do this every day. In fact, multiple times a day. We're probably installing 2 or 3 new systems a day, every single day, somewhere around the world. And we'll provide you with some documents up front that will help you plan how you want this to look. Okay?
That's good.
Yeah, and we know how it works, and believe me, everybody gets it done. So it's an easy process. So here in this server is where we're also going to put in your users and their access controls and put your groups together. Like eventually you might expand to HR, right? And so then we would put your people that are part of HR would be in an HR group. People in accounting would be in an accounting group, or maybe you want to separate it between AP and AR because they have different. Maybe you don't need to have the AR people have access to the AP documents and so on and so forth. So you can do it any way you want. We also will do things like manage backups and all that stuff here. But this is where we're also going to control that zonal scanning. So here we call it connections to external sources. So we're going to use a hot folder or just a folder out on your network. And so when you scan things in, so here's one example. Here's a vendor, right? Bargain Barn. You probably being in Tennessee have heard of them.
I guess. I don't think I have. But
well, they're over in Knoxville.
Okay.
Yeah, they were one of the first customers that LBMC sold.
What do they sell?
They're a grocery chain.
Oh, okay.
And so it's MyUgo is their corporate or their website or something, myugo.com. And but anyway, they have a chain of grocery stores, and so they bought M-Files. But we had the same exact discussion that I'm having with you. So you could create any number of vendor. We will create for you any number of vendor folders here, and because that zonal scan will be tied to that specific vendor's invoice. So
okay.
And I'm going to show you how that works with this hot folder here for this purchase invoice. And then workflow will be tied to the type of document, in this case the purchase invoice. So we'll create any number of workflows for you here that you want. And so we're going to walk through this one in just...
Can I ask a question about the workflows? So
sure can.
When you establish the workflows, is there any kind of reminder? So say if I've sent you 5 invoices and you haven't moved them along, is there any kind of reminder function that comes up and says, hey, Julie, you still have 5 invoices you need to do something with?
Exactly. So on the workflow, each step, well, you'll have the ability to put a deadline on it. Okay? But now also remember, here in the client, under Assign to Me, is going to always hold your open assignments that you haven't completed yet. So you'll always know. Plus, you're going to get an email every time you get a new assignment. So, for example,
any email that comes if you're late?
We can make it do whatever you want when that deadline expires.
Okay.
If you want to have another email sent, we can set it up that way. If you want to have it
That's
escalate,
kind of what I'm just looking for.
Yep.
Cues for people.
Absolutely.
So hey, because like when you do away with paper, sometimes it's easy to do away with things in your mind too. And so that's why I'm just trying to help think of things that can give them visual cues, and so they'll know that even though they don't have the invoice sitting on their desk, they've got it.
And then you, as the controller, will always be able to see things like, see this view here, assignments by employee. Here's all your people, and now you could go to any one of them, like Kimberly, and see what her open assignments are that she hasn't completed yet.
Oh, okay.
So from a management perspective, you can have that kind of oversight as well.
Okay.
All right, so let's create a document from scratch.
Okay.
So let's just create something simple, like a proposal. And so we'll make a proposal for Julie, and I'll do a file save as. Notice there's an M-Files tab up here. So that's that integration I was talking about. We'll use that in just a second. But now let's just do a file save as, so it goes immediately to M-Files. Now I have to collect, pick the vault. You won't have to do this. It just defaults right to the M-Files vault, and there's that user interface, right? All you do is click save. Nothing else to do. And that pops up that properties card, just like I've shown you 3 or 4 times now. So now you classify this document as what it is. So I happen to know proposal is under purchasing, so there's my proposal. And then there's that list of metadata that's been predefined with the asterisks indicating these are required. So literally in 3 seconds, I could select my date from a calendar. My customer now is coming from a list, right? Because we're connecting to a database to pull in all the customers. So I could just start typing if the list was 1,000 names, like your vendors. You said you had 300 vendors. Well, that's a long list.
Yeah.
You don't want to scroll through that list. You just want to type in, this is whatever vendor's name is, and it goes to that list and you find it. And now you can see that's all I have to do here. I could click create, and this document would then be saved into M-Files with this metadata. Now, there's other pieces of metadata on here that you can have that relate to other fields. So for example, the project, also a list, but notice now it's only showing me these projects because I've already picked this customer. So if I didn't have this customer on here, then the project is now a much bigger list. And so if I pick this project, then it asks me, do I want to auto-fill the other ones? And notice it predefined the customer and this contact person based on this project. So that just shows you that you can have multiple fields entered at the same time by selecting one value on one field. And
Can I ask you a question on this?
Sure.
We have 2 companies right now in the U.S. We have a corporate, and it's less like 2 companies. It is physically 2 companies in our general ledger package, but it's not within the legal entity structure. So it's really more like locations. Okay, so we have different sets of vendors and vendor numbers for each location.
Okay.
Because in our chart of account, or in our accounting software, it's physically 2 different companies.
Gotcha.
So would there be a way, and I'm confident that there is, that we could, have like you would have to pick a location, and then that location, if you were looking at the customer, that would bring you a whole different set of customers versus if you picked our plant location.
The answer is 100% affirmative.
Yeah, I figured you could, but I
Right.
just wanted to make sure.
And that's the same principle. So you can see, because I picked this project is only associated with that customer. So if we added a location property here, and that location property was associated with a certain list of vendors, then only those vendors would show up on the list to be able to select from.
Okay.
And so we would put the location code farther up, and then once the vendor selection is made, just like the project selection, we're only seeing, just like the customer selection, we only see a very few projects, right? So if you make your location selection, then when it comes to the vendor, then you're only going to see vendors associated with that location.
Okay.
Or
That's
customers.
good. I just wanted to make sure. I felt confident you could. But.
Yes, absolutely. It's the same exact principle that I'm showing you here. Then you can also put dates on here. So you can put on contracts or on invoices, we'll have a due date. and this has an effective through date. And then because you've got this metadata on here, so if we put 30 days out here, so today's June 4th, so let's say July 3rd, now I could create a view that will look for any proposals that are expiring within the next 30 days, and this will show up. So anytime this date falls within the range of a filter you've created, then this document will show up on that view.
Oh, okay.
So now you can put, these dates out here. Maybe you have insurance certificates that expire from contractors, or you have proposals where the pricing expires, or you have whatever it might be where you have an expiration date. You can put that date out here, and so then it can then show up in a view as that reminder you talked about. So maybe you guys have maintenance agreements with customers. They pay for a year, and then you want to know when their maintenance agreement is expiring so that you can make sure they renew it. So all of these things can be done, and then at the bottom you can see that everybody has access to this document, and then there's no workflow associated with it. And if you change the type of document, it will automatically change who can see it. So we talked about HR. So if I change this to an HR document, like a layoff notice, now you can see it's limiting who can see it to only 3 people. And because it's tied into the type of document, where with the proposal, everybody could see it. And then, of course, this doesn't have any workflow, but if the type of document, again, we were saving, if we say this was an invoice from a supplier, then now you can see it automatically ties that workflow right into the document properties card. When we hit create, it will kick off the workflow.
Okay.
So let's just leave it as proposal, and there's all of our stuff, and we just create this document. So now we've saved it into M-Files, and all you do is check it in. So it takes you right back to the vault, and now you have created this new document. You've saved it into M-Files, classified it with all of that metadata, and you can find it based on any of that information that you put in, whether it's metadata, contents, whatsoever. So, for example, if I type in Julie up here, we should find a number of things, including this document that we just created today, because that's a popular name with people, I guess, and we can see we'll see the actual text that we typed in. And so any of these columns, you can modify what you see up here. So, for example, I was apparently doing a demo for somebody that had a Medicaid ID number, and so I included that. So I can remove that column right from there. I can remove this column, and so I can put anything out here for this that I wanted to see. But then you can see there's our proposal for Julie. And if we go back to the metadata card and we make any changes to this metadata card, so let's add something here like Mills, and we save that. Now we've created a new version, and we have this included now in a searchable field. So if I just type in Mills, then it immediately finds the same document again, and you can see highlights the search term in yellow. And then notice, since I've highlighted a document, we're seeing these other selections over here. So I can always go back to the history of this document, and I can always see the changes between these documents. I can't open up a document to edit from here that's not the current version. So if I try to, it tells me that this is not the latest version, it's read-only. So I could open up the most current version. So we're always going to track the history of a document. And then adding text to a document is simply checking it out again. And so now we could put, whatever you guys make, 1,000 horses. We save that. And now if I went up here to this M-Files tab, and we're sitting here in Microsoft Word, if I click compare, it takes me right into the vault, right into the history where I could choose any prior version and click OK. Takes me right back to Word and shows me the two versions and what's different between them. And so now I could track merge and accept and reject and do whatever you want to do, you could create now even a new version by deleting stuff and whatever you want to do. So now if we save this back to the vault, now we've created and saved version 3 of that. And we could find it, by typing in horses if we wanted to. And of course, it will always be on our recently accessed screen, right here at the top. And anytime a document is in the vault, Julie, if you right-click on it, you have all kinds of things you can do. Here's where I would mark it for offline use. Here's where I would add it to my favorites. So if I just click that, I've now added our document into my favorites. So now if I lose my network connection, if I'm sitting on an airplane somewhere or whatever it might be, I don't have to worry about making sure I've got the documents I need to work on, sitting here on my desktop. I mean, how many documents do you have on the desktop of your laptop? I don't know, maybe not too many.
Well, I'll be frank, I don't save a lot of my stuff out there. I pretty much just save it, in a directory.
Right, but now it's on your C drive, right? And it's in your documents folders, and you got to search for it by navigating yourself to what you're trying to find. So now it's all about discipline. So if you put things in the vault, then all you have to do is mark it as a favorite, and then if you're not connected to the network and you open up M-Files, then it tells you and asks you if you want to work offline, and you say yes. So now notice it's only giving me my offline view. And there's my favorites, and there's our document that we just created today with our mills in the description. And so now I'm not connected to the server.
So when you're, like for example, if I have a particularly troublesome vendor that I want to, anytime I scan an invoice from them, I want to mark that as offline. I just do that in this properties, or do I have to actually look at the invoice?
Nope, you don't have to open the invoice. You don't have, all you have to do is, like I just did here, right-click on it, and
then do it there. Okay.
And you can take any one of these views. You could take your whole vendor view if you wanted and mark it for offline use. And so all the documents in there would be available to you. You don't have to worry about marking individual documents if you want to mark a group. So I've marked this whole group of favorites to be available to me offline. So now all I do is add documents to that group. Now, in a vendor view, for example, any one of these views, so like here's a vendor list, and so here's Bargain Barn, and you can see there's 13 documents. So that's going to happen automatically whenever a document comes into the vault that has that metadata on it, right? So that means that if I kept this view, this vendor list view, marked for offline use, then by right-clicking on it, everything in that document would always be, in that view, would always be available. And now you don't have to mark every document. It's just going to show up in that view because it has that vendor on it, right?
Oh, okay.
It's going to show up there because this is your list of vendors. So now everything in this list is going to show up in your offline view. Does that make sense? You want me to do it? You want me to do it and show you how it would work? So I'm going to right-click here, mark this whole view for offline. Okay? So now if you're on an airplane or you lose your network connection or whatever, and you have to go offline or you have to work offline, so there's my offline view, and look, there's my vendor list, and there's all of the documents. Well, it was there a second ago. I don't know where my documents went. Something must have glitched, but just like it did in that favorites view, it's the same thing. You have all the documents in that grouping of documents that you'll be able to mark, for offline use.
Okay.
So I don't know why it's not showing me them right now, but that's the way it's designed, and that's the way it will work for you.
Okay, that sounds good.
So you'll be able to see things offline at any given point in time. Okay, so we've looked at history, we did a compare, we did all kinds of stuff. We've looked at a couple of these views. So like customer view is going to show, like here's the customer that we used. So there's all the documents for that customer. Now this document isn't stored in all these different places, right? These are just different navigation paths, right, to get there.
Okay.
It's going to be, you're going to see that document in a project view because we have assigned that logo design project to it. So now you can see the same document's going to show up there. So the document will show up anywhere that it has metadata that you've created a view. So like documents by month and year, click here. We're in June of 2014. So look at that. You're the first document I've created in June.
Okay.
In my demo system. And so now it's by month and year. So now every document in the vault is going to be in that view. Now, if we look here at this proposal's expiring view, I'm going to right click on it and show you how this view was made. So now you can see we gave it a name and we said the filter is that I'm looking for a document that has not been deleted, and the days to this property, that effective through date, remember I stuck a date on that proposal, is less than 30 from today. That's what that means. Days to parentheses means today. That's all I did. Literally took 30 seconds to create this view. I'm not filtering, you know, I'm not showing it sorted in any particular way. So now if we did it right, then our 8086 ought to be at the top of this list. And there it is, because it's got this effective through date within 30 days of today. Because remember we stuck that date on there and said this, you know, this proposal expires in 30 days. And so you could do the same thing with invoices. You know, you could say invoices due to pay. And so all of these invoices are you know, almost, this one's not due yet, but, and neither is some of these, but then now this one's past due. So you haven't paid that.
Okay.
And so if we look at the properties of that invoice is due to pay, then, so we're looking for the name of invoices due to pay. We're looking for a document that hasn't been deleted, and the class equals invoice, so that's the type of document that's going to show up in this view, and the days to the due date are less than or equal to 30 days from today. And since we stuck that less than, anything that's past due will also show up there. So anything that's earlier than today's date, so that's why you see things from February, March, April, May in here.
Mm-hmm.
So less, any negative number obviously will be less than 30 days from today. So that's why those are all still showing up there. But you could filter those out as well if you wanted to. So these views, it's very simple to create these views and make this look the way that you want it to look. Now, let's run through this hot folder to show you the metadata, the scanning part.
Okay.
So here's the hot folder. So now you would name this, in this case, you know, maybe it's who's your biggest vendor, the biggest supplier.
Ryerson.
Okay, so this would be called Ryerson, right? And then here's the location of the Ryerson folder out on the network. Here's the action. We're going to import whatever we see there, delete the scan file, which is going to be in a TIFF file format. Have you ever heard that term, TIFF?
I have.
Okay, so the scanner will produce a TIFF, which is like a picture. And so then we're going to check that folder about every 10 seconds. And you can set this for whatever you want. Now here is where we're going to actually pick up the metadata. So here we would say the class is an invoice created by the scanner, stick this workflow on it, and now the vendor for this folder is going to be Ryerson, right? So we would obviously, instead of saying Bargain Barn, this would say Ryerson, But now we're going to pick up the invoice number, the vendor name, or any other type of information. Maybe it's the buyer, and the dollar amount off of the document itself in this example.
Okay.
But we could pick up 20 different fields if you wanted to. So like here's the location on the page in pixels from upper left corner to lower right corner. So anything we find in that location is going to be the invoice number. So that's why we get the invoice from you and we get the layout, right? So then we open it up, we create the TIFF file, we open it up in Microsoft Paint, and then we figure out that location. So these are the three pieces of variable data on this particular example that we're going to pick up. And then we're going to use the OCR module here to turn the whole thing into a fully text searchable PDF. And it's just that simple. So we'll create here, your however many you want, 10, 15 specific vendor folders. And then, if you want some more generic folders for the rest of them, now we have one for just scan purchase invoices, whatever else you want to scan in, we'll create those folders. Then the workflow looks like this. So it's just a very simple 5-step workflow in this case. So once it gets scanned in and it hits the vault, the workflow will kick off immediately, and this is who it's going to go to. And you predefine it by saying we're going to assign this to somebody or a group of people. So you could assign it to a group or you could assign it to an individual, whoever you want to take that first step. And in this case, check it, add the GL code, the due date, and the project and PM. Now in your case, the some of the other information might get populated, like the location will determine this and that and the other thing. But if you want them to add the GO code, then this will be a required field, and they can't close it without entering that information. And see, here's where the deadline is, 3 days.
Oh,
so then once the deadline passes, you can define what you want to happen. Do you want them re-notified? Do you want somebody else notified? So there's a place to do that as well. Then once they complete their piece of the workflow, then it's going to go to undetermined. Because if you noticed in that first workflow, part of that assignment was to identify the project manager. And so that's going to determine who has to approve this invoice. So the purpose of that is to show you that it doesn't have to be a fixed assignment. It can be, because mFiles is metadata driven, it can be a variable assignment based on what the person in the first step enters. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so there's another 3-day deadline. And then, once that project manager approves it, then it goes to John. You've already seen this step where John has to write the check and add it to the accounting system. And then, you could build some other steps down here to take action if somebody rejects it along the way for some reason. So these workflows can get very detailed and very involved. There can be scripting. We can do all kinds of things. We can call third-party applications. There's all kinds of stuff we can do. Let's run that workflow. So let's go find our scan folder. Are we okay on time? A few more minutes?
Yes, I've got a few.
Okay. So here's the invoice sitting out here. We'll just scan it into this hot folder. So you can see it's a TIFF file. And mFiles is monitoring this folder. And when it sees it out here somewhere in that 10-second range, it'll pick it up. And then it's going to do all that stuff that we talked about. Convert it, delete it. So you can see it left. So now it's in the vault. So if we find it, and again, there's lots of different ways that we can find it. I can type in invoice, for example. And then it's going to go look, at all the invoices in the vault and bring me back, the list of all the invoices in the vault. And you'll be able to then look at it, complete workflow. This is not normal. Something must be indexing or something right now, and I must have hit it right on a bad cycle. I don't know. So there's the list. So it's taking its time to index this. Something must have caused my Windows system to slow down here all of a sudden. This my demo system, just FYI, is sitting out on an SSD. It's a solid state drive that's attached to my laptop via USB connection. And sometimes it's running VMware. It's running a virtual Windows operating system, and sometimes it just gets crazy. So there it is. It's on the list there. So there's the invoice. You can see 327, 328. And you can see all the metadata it picked up. Now, you can see that there's a dollar amount, there's the invoice number, and there's the buyer that it picked up off of the conversion of that TIFF file to the PDF. And so there's the invoice number, there's the buyer, and then there's the dollar amount. Now, also, that's probably a little small for you to see, I'm guessing. Anytime you have a view here, right click, you can always zoom in as far as you want, and then you can move around with your displays. Now the reason it's a little bit small is because I'm doing this demo for you on a laptop. So if you were on your workstation, you would have a much bigger screen probably. But now you can see that it's currently assigned to me, and M-Files will send an email to me to let me know that I have this assignment. So if I check my email, then there should be an email, and there it is. So there's an email from M-Files saying that I have a new assignment. There's the link. So that's another thing I didn't continue down that list of when you have a document in the vault and you right-click on it, one of the things that you can do, like our invoice that we created today, I stopped. I talked about offline, but you can do a lot of things, including communication externally and internally. One of those being send a link. So if I click send a link, then it automatically opens up Outlook and sticks it on your email. And if you're going to send this to a customer, then you could automatically create a PDF. Again, in just 2 or 3 seconds, it creates the PDF and attaches it right to your email. And I meant to show you that earlier, Julie, and I'm sorry I didn't. But so now we have our assignment here. I'm sitting at my desk and I see it, so I can just click on the link and it takes me right to that location in the vault, right? But now I wanted to go back here and show you, remember I said something about that dashboard on the home screen?
Right.
So there's that assignment showing up. So now I'm your clerk or whoever gets this invoice in the first step of your workflow. So what's my assignment? I've got to add the GL code, the due date, and the project information. Okay, so the due date, this vendor has 30-day terms. Then the project from the list. Then I got to identify the project manager to know who's going to approve this, and then add my GL code, whatever that might be. And now I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and I just click save, and that creates the new version. Now remember over here in the workflow, now I just can be done. I don't have to put any notes in here because M-Files knows who did it and when it was done. But you could, you could type something in here. Looks good, says Julie or whatever, info added. I mean, you can type anything you want. And that will be saved along with the record. Now you can see that it's now version 3. And so there's all that, everything's been done. It's now in the history, but notice it's still showing assigned to me because I put myself in here as that project manager to do the approval because I wanted to show you on the smartphone how that would look.
Okay.
So in case some of you or your people are traveling and those kind of things, then you would be able to participate in workflow. And so I've got to log in here. And we have apps, like I said, for all of the phone types, smartphones and everything. And So now you can see this is what you would see, and this is actually what it looks like. Here's a picture of my iPhone in this view. So there's my iPhone 5. So there's the mFiles app sitting out there, and there's one of our demo vaults. So that's just a screen capture of that. So we go back to our document. So now if I look at assigned to me, then I should see an invoice here, which I do. Look at the properties of it just to make sure it's the right one. So I can look at this created date, 6/4 at 3:26, so you can see that matches. So now I can do my workflow. I could look at it, of course, whatever I need to do, but then I could approve it to be paid right from here. I don't have to put any comments in, but the comments will be saved, along with the workflow record. So now you can see there's nothing there. And now if you go back to the vault, the cell phone's going to communicate back to the vault, and you can see that went away because it's now assigned to John, right?
Okay.
And so it's no longer in my workflow. It's now in John's workflow. So if I went to assignments by employee and looked at John, then you'd see, sorted by due date, you'd see there's the one that we just did today that's in his workflow.
And does that, this may be a dumb question, but
no dumb questions.
That mobile app feature, that mobile app feature, is that irregardless of whether you have on-premise or cloud vault?
Yes.
Okay.
Works in both cases.
Okay.
And then so if you get an invoice in the email, Julie, here's how you would save it into mFiles. So here's an email with an attachment. It's a confirmation order, but it's the same thing if it was an invoice. So you'll see your vault over here. Of course, you have the mFiles tabs up here as well, but you'll see, the Mills vault over here, whatever you want to name it. And so here's my DMS vault that we're working in. So now I can drag and drop this email right in the vault, and then you could classify it. So in this case, it's a confirmation of order. Your case would be an invoice. But what we would do is we'd create smart folders here, which would predefine some information. So now here you can say this particular smart folder, these are all going to be confirmation of orders, and we're going to pick up the date and any other information we can glean from the email address and those kind of things, and I don't have to classify it. So if I drop it here, it automatically goes directly into mFiles, and I can go back to the vault, and if I search for that email, like type in confirmation, then there it is right there. You can sort again by date modified, but there's that email with all the things, the attachment, the message, and we found a customer. So now this email will show up in that customer view, right?
Right.
And then right from here, look what I can do. I can open the email. I could reply right from within mFiles.
Oh, okay, good.
So you don't have to store emails in your Outlook anymore, because eventually you're going to get a call from your IT guy who says your mailbox is too full, right?
Yeah.
And so all my customer-related emails go directly into we have a vault that we use for CRM, and all my emails go directly into that vault. And if I ever need to reply to somebody, I just go find it in the vault, and I reply right from there. So it's just that easy to get things into the vault. So what else can I show you? I know I've kept you way too long, and I apologize profusely, but in my defense, you did ask me some questions.
No, I mean, I like the way this looks, and I could see, lots of, certainly lots of applications for it. I guess I don't really have any specific questions. I think we've kind of asked the ones I've had as I've went along, and
Okay.
I think for me, the helpful thing, and I'm assuming that the LBMC folks work with the installation piece as well to kind of guide us along, because we have a very limited IT staff, and I guess, getting the documents to help us plan our installation or integration or whatever you want to call it would be good, because we've done some other integrations and they did not go as well as I had hoped, and primarily I think part of that was because we didn't define the process as well as we should have on the front end. So any help that you guys, or I guess LBMC, whomever, can provide in making sure that we collect the right data to make sure that we understand the process as much as possible would be very helpful to us.
Sure. Now, some of this information that's on these metadata cards, like vendor lists and that kind of stuff, do you guys have those in a database somewhere today?
Well, I'm sure they are in a table within our GL systems that we could get out.
What is your GL system? Do you know the vendor or the brand?
I do. We use a package called SysPro.
SysPro. Okay.
It's actually out of South Africa. It's a pretty good package for what it is. And we certainly do some queries out of it using an ODBC connection. So
that's all we need.
I know that we can get the.
Yep, that's all we need. If it has an ODBC connection, then we can create over here in the server. So we'll create a connection. So for any of these objects, like you'll have a vendor object or a supplier object, whatever you want to call it. So like we have the customer object here. If I right click on it and show you the properties, then here you can see we have created a connection to this external database. We'll do the same thing for you in connecting into the ODBC. So here's the connection string into that database, whatever it's required. Maybe there's a password, and then we'll pick the data. You'll tell us what data you want to bring in from that database. So now that's what will be added to the system, and so that's what the metadata is for this particular property. And now you can see that we are allowing users to create these things as well. So if you get a new supplier that's not in your database and you're creating the metadata for your invoice, right? And it's got this vendor property on it. So right here, so now you have a new supplier. You got a new invoice and a new supplier. Today, I suspect you might have to go back to somebody in IT or somebody else to add this vendor or this supplier into the database. Or do you do it yourself?
Typically they give it to IT and they do it.
So that's again, another beautiful thing about M-Files is it puts the power in your hands. So now this invoice is from, I don't know if I spelled that right, but Ryerson.
That's it.
Okay, so notice it isn't on the database. So now I can add Ryerson into the database, and I haven't built this properties card out, to include, very much information for the vendor. But then all of the information for Ryerson, their address, their phone number, their contact names, their terms, whatever you want to put in here for your vendor properties will be, we'll predefine that. You can create this new vendor, and now, we could add a contact in here. So now I'd have to create it somewhere else in this case. I haven't built that structure out. But now, and that's not a required property, but now I could create, and now Ryerson is a vendor on the drop-down list for all the vendors.
Okay.
So I just added them right to the list, and it will populate, and I can do the same thing with customer. Same thing with if I went, to create a new customer, I could add this information right in to the database, and it will populate back to that table using that ODBC connector. So you could add it right from within M-Files and it will populate back to the database. You don't even have to call IT to do anything.
So you're saying it will add it back into
your
General
GL
Ledger
system.
database?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
If you want it to. So
Yeah.
notice the connection properties here have been set up, see, to be updatable, and it's two-way.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys to define if you want to allow users to create new content and send it back to those tables.
I got you.
Doesn't have to be set up that way, but it can be, because we connect to lots of systems for people, you know, CRM systems,
Yeah, sure.
and ERP systems and accounting systems, and so we'll bring all this various information in. But if there's no system, you can still create the lists here in M-Files. And so, you know, you can have any type of list be like value lists. So like here, for example, if you have a property for states, then, you know, you could see the contents. And so here's Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, North Carolina, South Carolina, whatever. So you can, and there's no data that describes a state. It's just a name. That's why it's not an object. It's just a list. So now if you're adding a state property to any one of these documents over here, you know, like over here I could add a property, and if I type in ST, then there's state. So now I've added that state property, and there's my list. But now if I type in,
Okay.
but if I type in Tennessee, now guess what? Save that. So now I've got that on this document. We've got Tennessee as a state, but now Tennessee is going to be on the list as well anytime anybody else looks for it.
And
so
I guess we define who can do, I mean, like,
right.
I guess in my past life I used to call that what you're talking about kind of like dynamic insertion. So
Correct. Exactly.
people
That's a
can-
perfect way to describe it.
Okay.
And now, but you can define that here again because I checked this box.
Okay.
We allow users to do the dynamic insertion. What you described was perfect.
Okay.
So it doesn't
Okay.
have to be set up that way, but it can be.
But some people, you could define it where, can you define it so that maybe one person could, or two people could do that, but maybe not everybody?
Exactly. So I can define,
Okay.
I can define who could add. See, now everybody can do it. Okay. But I could make it so that only certain people are allowed.
Okay.
See where it says add new
Okay.
values to the list? So the people I define up here, I could say I could deny access to everybody that's up here, and then that would by default allow everybody else. Or I could click and put a couple names up here that are allowed, and that would by default deny everybody else. Does that make sense?
It does.
So we can fully control who can do everything within M-Files. Trust me.
Well, that's what I figured. I just always remembered with dynamic insertion, in Oracle, when I worked with that, it could get tricky sometimes if you let everybody do it.
Yeah.
You get people that didn't know what they were doing, and it
Right.
would suddenly make a record that was incorrect.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you can control all of that, and we'll walk you through that whole process. And I know that I've shown you a lot of stuff, Julie, but hopefully you've seen that it's very simple to use M-Files. It's very easy. If you can left-click, right-click, and then drag and drop things, then you can do everything that there is to do in M-Files. So, for example,
it's great to me.
if we went back to our desktop, so here's M-Files. So if I wanted to drag and drop like this PDF into the vault, I just simply do it. I just drag and drop it, and then I can classify it, and that will be saved into the vault. Just that simple.
Okay, great.
If this document that I was going to drag in is a TIFF file, like this one, here's a TIFF file sitting out here, guess what it's going to do? First thing, ask me, do I want to convert it? And then it will convert it to a fully text searchable PDF document, and then the properties card will pop up and I can classify it. So it's just that simple to save things into the vault by just simply dragging them in from anywhere you want.
Okay.
It's so easy. And then again, left click highlights it, right click opens up the menu where you can do all kinds of stuff with it. And there's so many more things, that I didn't even show you.
Yeah.
So, okay, but I know I've taken way too much of your time, Julie, so I really appreciate it. The next thing that I'm sure that we are going to want to talk about is kind of figure out how many users that you would like to have. And we have named users, and we have concurrent users, and we have read-only. So a concurrent user, is a shared license, and a named user is a named user. So that's an individual person's license. So concurrent is shared. So you could buy, a couple of concurrent licenses and share it between, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, and they just can only be 2 of them on at the same time.
Okay.
And then we can put together a quote for you. And the implementations, your implementation, we'd be done in less than a week.
Okay.
So, probably 3, 4, 5 days maximum.
And do you do that just virtually?
Yep.
Or on site? Okay.
We can come on site, but there really isn't any need to, especially in a company your size. How many approximate users are you thinking about?
I guess from the get-go, 10 maybe.
Okay. So, there really would be no need to come on site unless you just really wanted somebody there in person. Then, of course, you're having to pay travel costs and all that. Because,
I don't think it's necessary. I just was asking.
Yeah.
I assumed it was virtual, but
Yep.
I just, you never hurts to ask.
Yep, we can do everything virtually, and get it all done that way, and it works very simple. And like I said, we'll help you, and the tech guys, Jason Loisink and those guys at LBMC are very knowledgeable. They'll be involved in the process as well.
Okay. Well, thanks, David.
Thank you, Julie, and I'll send you this PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, let me know, and then I'm sure Jason is going to be following up with you.
He will be.
I'm sure. Okay.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.